Welcome, and if you're new to this channel, my name's Abdul Wahid, and I am building a 20-foot catamaran sailboat in my garage. And in this video, I'm excited to go past the point of just a bunch of flat panels, and the boat is actually starting to take shape. So I'm going to show you how I epoxy 3 of the bulkheads into place. There's one of them right here, as well as explain some of the airtight water compartments, or I should say airtight compartments, and the location of some of the storage compartments. All of these will be configured by the bulkheads. So yeah, so I'm excited to show you the progress, and here's what's going on. I just put the second stringer on top of the first stringer to double it up, and now we'll have about 1.5 inches of thickness, and it's still about 1 inch wide. And I put some extra weights up here at the front to hold the curve down as best I could, including some car ramps and my extra large C-clamps, and even a vise there to try to add some extra weight to hold that curve down while the second stringer epoxy cures. And I'm about to take the clamps off and also cut out the next bulkhead. So I've got bulkhead number 6 here, which goes at the aft end of the boat, and I can cut that one out because there's still the bulkhead number 5 that goes between number 4 and number 6, so I'll be able to use the batten to measure the dimensions of bulkhead number 5. But since bulkhead number 6 is at the end, I can go ahead and measure that one out and cut it, because it should follow the angle here, this angle down here. It'll follow that from the plans. So I'm going to get that cut out, and now that I've got the second stringer here, I can notch this corner and be able to start lining up the hull bottoms, or I should say the hull bottom. I'm only working on one for right now. All the clamps are off, and the edge has been sanded and wiped clean with alcohol, and I put the notches in the bulkheads, and I also covered the notch area with some tape because I don't want it to stick to I don't want any epoxy to stick to it just yet. So we've got, this is bulkhead number 6, and then we have bulkhead number 4, also with the notch and with some tape around where the epoxy is going to be. And then we have bulkhead number 2. And then this is where the hull bottom is going to go, all along here to the front. So the next step is to apply some thickened epoxy and set the hull bottom in place, get it lined up, clamped in, and let it cure. Everything is held in place as square as I can get it, and the large C-clamps did a really good job of reaching all the way from the top of the hull bottom all the way down to the stringer to be able to clamp it in place. And the clamps that are holding the bulkheads in place are not really strong. They're really just to hold the bulkheads up so that I can measure the squareness and make sure that the hull bottom is square with the whole side. And there it is all the way to the front. So took a lot of clamps, and now just let that epoxy cure, and it should cure with a nice square hull bottom once it's done. Now that the epoxy is cured, I removed all the clamps from the hull bottom, and it is standing up straight and quite sturdy. I mean, if I try to wiggle it, it barely moves at all. So it is epoxied very securely. And after that, I started working on the stringers for the top side of the hull side, and have those two stringers glued side by side, and they are along this side. They also curve up here at the front where I have all the weights and sandbags and everything to hold the hull side at a curve. And other than that, the two stringers here are straight, in that this whole side is straight all along here. So unlike the hull bottom, which curved in, the top of the hull side here is straight at the top. So the only bend in the stringer is up here at the bow end, where the hull side curves up a bit. Now I also put the two stringers on in a different orientation. So these two are side by side going this way, so they're kind of standing up, and I think that gives it a well, it doesn't need to stand up as high because I'm not trying to reach over the top and try to clamp on like I was with the hull bottoms. So for these stringers, I think this is a better orientation. So yeah, so once the epoxy dries, then I think I will put some extra notches in the bulkheads and try to fit the bulkheads in. The next stringer to put down will lay out an airtight compartment that will protect the boat in case it floods, that it will still continue to float. And there are two airtight compartments in each hull, one at the rear and one at the front of each hull. So I've kind of marked out the location of where this stringer would be. And if I was following the plans exactly, then I would go ahead and glue these stringers in. But I've modified the boat a little bit. I'm making it longer, and I've also made the hulls wider, and I've made the hulls thicker. And as best as I can tell, I'm probably increasing the weight of the boat by, well, I'm guessing here, by when it's all done, I'll probably increase the weight of the boat by about 350 pounds. Now that's a lot, considering the original weight of the boat is, according to the plans, should be about 620 pounds. So I'm increasing the weight of the boat by over 50%. And I need to make sure that this is still going to float according to the waterline. And I think it will, because I calculated that while I'm increasing the weight by about 350 pounds, because I'm increasing the width of the hull bottoms, I think I'm also going to increase the buoyancy by about 350 pounds. So it should even out. But we still have the problem of the airtight compartments, and I want to make sure that the airtight compartments are big enough to support the new weight of the boat. And according to my calculations, I think I need to move these out by about, let's say about 4 or 5 inches here to right here. Now, the water line is still going to be down here, but I want the airtight compartments to be a little bit bigger, because if the boat floods, it doesn't care at all where the original water line is. These compartments have to be big enough to support the weight of the boat. So I think this is where I'm going to put these stringers to define the airtight compartments. After thinking about this a little more, I'm going to change the plan slightly, because I'm going to try to put a step back here. So that means that this stringer is not going to pass through bulkhead 6. And it's also not going to pass through bulkhead 4 up here. It will pass through bulkhead 5, which comes about here. So that means I'm going to go ahead and put bulkhead 6, 4, and 2 in place. And once they're in place, then I'll put these stringers in to define the airtight compartments. I cut 2 stringers for bulkhead 4 and 6 to fit here directly on the hull side, in between the 2 stringers, the top stringer here and the bottom stringer down there. They're not glued in yet, they're still sitting here, but these I want to glue in directly on the line here, and the bulkhead 4 will go on this side of the stringer. And down here for bulkhead 6, I'm going to do a similar stringer where I'm going to glue this one in down here, only in this case the bulkhead will go on the back end of this stringer. And the only really tricky part here was just making sure to get this angle. It's a slight angle right here so that it comes up against that stringer nice and flush. And I decided to put the stringers down first because it's possible that there's a slight bend. You can see that this whole side can move up and down a little bit. So I wanted to make sure that I can put weights on this and get this, in case there's any slight bow in this, I want to make sure that this stringer is fully bonded against the whole side. So I think that's going to be the best way to glue these down, instead of trying to glue the stringers onto the bulkheads first. I'm going to glue the stringers onto the whole sides and then glue the bulkheads onto everything once the stringers are in place. The two stringers are epoxied in place. This is the stringer here that will support bulkhead number 4, and this is the stringer that will support bulkhead number 6. And I've also removed all of the weights from the bow section, because one of the things I want to do is lift this up just a little bit now so that I can sand this edge with some of the squeeze out epoxy, get that off there, because soon these bulkheads are going to start being glued in place, and it's going to be harder to sand this surface later once those bulkheads are in there. So I think it's a good idea to get that done now. And this surface has been scraped, but it hasn't been sanded, so I think it'll be a good idea. Let me just do a full sanding session and get all of this roughed up a bit, because later even this will get a layer of fiberglass, so I want it to be rough anyway, so might as well do all this sanding now. After sanding, there's a nice clean edge on this stringer, and the entire inside hull is sanded and is much less shiny now than it used to be, and it's all ready for additional epoxy and later for fiberglass. For the bulkheads, one of the most important things is to make sure that they are square. So I clamped a square and am aligning the bulkhead at a 90-degree angle with the hull side. And then while it's there, I'm making some pencil marks on the hull bottom so that I can line that up with those pencil marks when I epoxy it in place. And I can do that because the hull side here is flat and straight at this point. Now, when it comes time also I can do the same thing here for bulkhead number 4 and later for bulkhead number 5. But when it comes time for bulkheads number 1 and 2, the hull side is now getting to a curve, so I won't be able to use the square up against the hull side. But I do have a line on the hull bottom that was drawn in place when they were first being measured and cut, and that line is what I will use to make sure that the hull sides are straight up and down by making them perpendicular to that line. So that I'll have to do a little bit more measuring when I get up here to the bow section to make sure that these bulkheads are straight, but it's quite easy back here when the hull side is flat to just use the square right up against the hull side and make sure that they're at 90-degree angles. So I measured and cut this little stringer right here, and it fits in there quite nicely. There's a tiny bit of a gap along this line, along this edge, because the whole bottom is slightly at an angle, but I don't think I'm going to worry about that one. Now for this little hull stringer over here, it's a different story. there's a lot of angles going on here. So first of all, bring the camera over here, you can see that this top part needs to be cut down like that to match the angle of the bulkhead, but the whole side is also sloping down a bit. So when I cut this piece off here, I also need to slope it up a little bit. And then when this one sits in here, there's a much more noticeable gap along there. You can see it probably pretty good right here, that little gap right in there. And that's because the whole bottom is sloped in this way, so I'll need to cut a little bit off of that. So this little stringer right here is going to need a lot of angles cut in it to get it fit in there, and I'm just going to dry fit it, make various cuts and dry fit it until I'm happy with it. So after cutting everything, I am very happy with the way this fits. I used the bandsaw to make the compound cut at the end by tilting the table a little bit, and originally I had it cut a little bit long. So the nice thing about a bandsaw is you can come along and cut off this little piece here, and now it fits exactly the way it needs to. And I used the table saw to make the angled cut along the long edge that will fit up against the whole bottom where it's also curved. This is bulkhead number 2 that I have not glued in yet, and there is a problem. I've known about this for a while now, but here's the issue. When I cut this out, I cut this edge a little too low, and there's a gap here that I intend for there to be a gap for the planking to go along here, but this is just like 3 or 4 millimeters too low from where it is supposed to be. Now, and I cut both of these at the same time. I cut both bulkheads at the same time, so the same error is for both of the holes. So luckily, because this is bulkhead number 2, and it's here at the front end of the boat where the whole bottom starts to curve back down again, we can recover from this, and I don't have to cut new bulkheads. All I need to do is, this is the line here where the bulkhead is supposed to go. All I really need to do is move this forward, maybe like 4 inches or so, and that will give the proper distance here for the planking that will go on, and that's how I'm going to solve this issue. So I'm going to slide this bulkhead number 2 forward just a little bit, and that's where it's going to be epoxied in place. Here is the original bulkhead line. You can barely make it out there because it's underneath the epoxy and it's been sanded, and I'm moving it forward by 5 1/4 inches, and this will be the new bulkhead line here. And coming over here, I used the line that is going lengthwise down the keel, and the square, and drew the perpendicular line here that the bulkhead will follow to be able to get it straight up, which is not a 90-degree angle with the whole side, because the whole side at this point is already starting to taper. So I'm going to do what I did with the other 2 bulkheads, and I'm going to put a stringer along this new bulkhead line. And I think for this one I'm also going to put the stringer up and down here as well. And the gap that I want to leave here at the top edge of this, between the edge of the bulkhead and the edge of the whole bottom, is 16 millimeters, which will be the thickness of the cedar planking that will go on there. I think I'm actually going to reposition some of the other bulkheads as well, and not because I cut the boards wrong, but because when I extended the length of the hulls, I tried to keep the bulkheads mostly in line with the original plans. And I put a board down here on where this bulkhead number 5 would go. And I kept it there originally because I wanted to avoid the seam, the jigsaw puzzle piece seam between the two pieces of plywood. But now that I have the planking on the other side, I don't think it's that problematic if I was to move this bulkhead more towards the center between bulkheads 4 and 6. And I think that will provide more structural support for the boat to have those bulkheads centered. And also up here at the front, I put some boards here to show where the current plan is. And it wasn't so bad when I had this bulkhead number 2. Now I have epoxied this in place. This bulkhead number 2 was originally supposed to be at about here. And that would have made a nice even distance between the front and bulkhead 1, and then between bulkhead 1 and bulkhead 2. But now that bulkhead 2 has moved back, there's a big discrepancy between these. So I'm thinking I'm going to move bulkhead 1 a little bit forward as well, just to even it out a bit. And I think that will be better overall. Now, for bulkhead number 3, it's not an actual piece of wood like the other bulkheads, but it is a bulkhead. It is more of a frame. And right now, it's fairly centered here. Again, I got this piece of wood here to help make it because the lines are a little bit hard to see. You can barely make out that line here. The distance or the gap between bulkhead 2 and 3, and then between bulkhead 3 and 4, is quite large. Even though it is centered, I'm thinking I'm going to add 2 bulkheads here, or 2 frames. So I'm going to put one about there, and then I'm going to put another one about here. So I'm actually going to create a new bulkhead here, and I think that will actually be better overall because, well, you know, I did extend the length of the hull, and adding a new bulkhead with the longer hull kind of makes sense. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to add a new bulkhead frame in here. So there's going to be 2 of them now. And this is the open area of the hull. And it's right in the middle of the boat. So I think it needs some extra support anyway. So that is the plan for right now. Here is the state of the boat as it is now, with 3 of the bulkheads epoxied in place. This is bulkhead number 6. I have the support pieces to hold bulkhead number 5, and bulkhead number 4 is in place. For bulkhead number 3, I'm doubling it. So in other words, I'm going to make 2 bulkheads here, and so I don't have to renumber all of them. I'm going to call this bulkhead 3A and 3B. So I think 3A will be towards the front and 3B will be here towards the back. And for these, there won't actually be a piece of plywood in them. It'll just be a piece of support wood or stringer, I guess you could call it. I heard different names for these, so I don't know if these are actually called stringers when they're going this way or not. But so I'm just going to call it a support wood, or maybe a gusset or something like that. So it'll be 2 pieces that are coming this way along the whole side to reinforce that. And here is bulkhead number 2, and I have the supports in place for bulkhead number 1. And there will be some airtight compartments up here in the front of the boat, and the plans actually call for a airtight compartment just along the bottom edge there. There's not a lot of space up here in this area, So I'm thinking I'm going to make the airtight compartment go from here along the bottom and come up to here. So this entire front of the bow will be a airtight compartment, and then this area in here will be storage that I'm thinking I'm going to cut access hole in this bulkhead to be able to access the storage in here. And likewise back here we have the airtight compartments that are here in the back. There will be two airtight compartments. One will be back here and one will be here. They will be separated by an actual bulkhead here, and so those will be completely sealed off. There will be some access panels, watertight access panels here from the inside. So on the panel that's going up, that'll actually form the floor of the storage compartments. There will be two watertight access panels for that. And directly above the airtight compartments are the storage compartments that'll be here and here. They will be two separate storage compartments, also separated by this bulkhead. And access to the rearmost storage compartment, I'm thinking I will have a access panel here in the seating area in the cockpit to access this storage area. And to access this storage area, I'm again going to make a hole in this bulkhead so that you'll be able to access this storage area from inside the cabin and this storage area from outside. Alright, so the next step here I think is going to be making some battens to get the proper curves, and then figuring out the dimensions of the bulkhead. So we've got a bulkhead that will go here, let's see, this is number 5. So figuring out the dimensions for bulkhead number 5, as well as figuring out the dimensions for bulkhead number 1 that goes at the front. And that, I believe, will be the topic of the next video. So that should be all for this video. So I'll get this posted so you can see the progress being made so far. My son saw the boat recently and he said it's becoming 3D, and that's true. It is progressing. No more just flat panels. So we're progressing past the point of just flat panels, and we're turning it into the shape of a boat now. So I'm excited, and I'm also excited to share with you the progress as the boat proceeds. Alright, so that's enough for now. Bye.